History remembers Rome for its legions, its laws, its vast roads and soaring aqueducts. But beneath the surface of that grandeur was a brutal truth, an empire built on conquest, slavery, and oppression. And in the 1st century BCE, one man stood up against that machine, not a senator, not a general, but a slave, a gladiator, a man who sparked the greatest slave revolt in Roman history, Spartacus. He didn't rise from nobility. He didn't seek empire. He didn't dream of conquest. Spartacus fought for something more primal, freedom. And for nearly 3 years, he humbled the Roman Republic. We don't know much about his early life. Historians tell us he was born in Thrace, a rugged land of warriors and tribes in what is now modern-day Bulgaria or northern Greece. Some say he served as a soldier in the Roman auxiliary and later deserted. Others claim he was captured during a campaign. What we know for sure is that by 73 BCE, he was a slave and then a gladiator, forced to kill for sport, reduced from man to spectacle. But behind the iron and blood, he remembered freedom, and he watched, and he waited. Then came the breakout. In 73 BCE, Spartacus and around 70 other gladiators broke out of their barracks, overpowering guards with kitchen tools, cleavers, spits, anything they could use. They seized wagons of weapons and fled into the slopes of Mount Vesuvius. From there, they began to attract other fugitives, slaves, herdsmen, disenfranchised veterans, outlaws. What began as a prison break grew into a rebellion, and what Rome dismissed as a band of fugitives would soon become a revolutionary army. Spartacus was not the only leader. Alongside him were Crixus and Anamaris, fellow gladiators of Gallic and possibly Numidian origin. But it was Spartacus who showed strategic brilliance. He outmaneuvered Roman patrols. He trained his forces in military discipline. He equipped them with captured arms, reorganized them into units, and even developed siege tactics. He wasn't just fighting, he was building something. At first, Rome barely noticed. They sent poorly prepared militias, overconfident, undertrained. Spartacus crushed them, again and again. Then the Senate sent 2 consuls. Spartacus routed them too. His army grew, 10,000, then 30,000, perhaps as many as 120,000 men, women, and children followed him. Former slaves, freedmen, dispossessed farmers, even some disillusioned Roman citizens joined him. It wasn't just a revolt, it was a reckoning. Spartacus had no illusions about conquering Rome. He tried several times to lead his people north over the Alps for freedom. But many among his ranks wanted to stay, to loot, to punish their former masters, and so they turned south again. Rome grew terrified. Panic spread through the Senate. Slaves in cities were interrogated, tortured, executed, just for suspicion of sympathy. In response, the Senate turned to Marcus Licinius Crassus, the richest man in Rome. He took command of 8 legions and brought brutal discipline. When his soldiers fled battle, he revived an ancient punishment, decimation. 1 in 10 soldiers beaten to death by their comrades. Crassus meant to make an example of his own men and of the rebellion. Spartacus, meanwhile, was forced to make impossible choices. With an army burdened by non-combatants and short on supplies, he tried to negotiate safe passage. Crassus refused. Spartacus even tried to strike a deal with pirates to ferry his people to Sicily, where he could reignite the rebellion and link up with discontented slaves. But the pirates betrayed him. Cut off, surrounded, Spartacus made his last stand in 71 BCE in southern Italy. The exact location is uncertain, possibly the Salarius River Valley. There, he led a final charge, slicing through enemy lines, seeking Crassus himself. Spartacus fell, sword in hand, facing overwhelming odds. His body was never found. In the aftermath, Crassus crucified over 6,000 rebel captures along the Appian Way, the main road between Capua and Rome. A chilling message, carved in blood, to any who would think to challenge Roman order. But while Rome silenced his body, it couldn't erase his story. In time, Spartacus became a symbol, not of conquest, but of resistance. Historians like Plutarch and Appian, though Roman in loyalty, couldn't deny his brilliance. And in centuries to come, revolutionaries across the world would speak his name. From Enlightenment thinkers to Marxist theorists, from Haitian rebels to modern freedom fighters, Spartacus stood for the eternal truth that power does not legitimize oppression. He never wrote a manifesto. He never sought a crown. He only asked for freedom and fought with everything he had for it.
In a world ruled by chains, Spartacus broke his, and for a moment, just a moment, he made Rome tremble. Rome's greatest threat was never only its enemies beyond the borders. Again and again, its most dangerous challengers rose from within, men who knew its laws, its legions, its weaknesses. One such man lived during one of Rome's darkest reigns. His name was Gaius Julius Vindex. Vindex was not a barbarian, not a slave, not an outsider. He was a Roman senator, a provincial governor, a man educated in Roman culture, loyal to its ideals, but not to its corruption. And the man he rebelled against was the Emperor Nero. By the mid-60s CE, Rome was rotting from the top. Nero, once hailed as a promising young ruler, had become a symbol of excess and cruelty. He drained the treasury for palaces and spectacles. He executed senators on suspicion. He humiliated the elite. He ignored the provinces. The Roman people suffered, and the legions grew restless. Vindex governed Gallia Lugdunensis, modern central France, a region loyal to Rome but weary of exploitation. Taxes were crushing, officials were corrupt. Nero's demands grew more extravagant with every passing year. Vindex watched as Rome's values, discipline, duty, honor, were replaced by fear and vanity. Unlike Spartacus, Vindex did not rebel with a sword in hand. He rebelled with words first. He openly denounced Nero as a tyrant. He called upon fellow governors and commanders to rise, not to destroy Rome, but to save it from a mad emperor. His vision was not anarchy, but restoration. This was unprecedented. A Roman senator publicly declaring rebellion against a reigning emperor, not for personal ambition, but for moral outrage. Vindex knew he could not win alone. His legions were few, his position vulnerable. So he reached out to Servius Sulpicius Galba, governor of Hispania Tarragonensis, a respected general with strong ties to the army. Vindex urged Galba to take up the mantle of leadership and challenge Nero's legitimacy. Galba hesitated. Rebellion meant death if it failed, but Vindex's message spread. Governors whispered, senators listened. The idea that Nero could be removed, that the emperor was not untouchable, took root. Rome's response was swift and brutal. The Rhine legions, loyal not to Nero but to Roman order, marched against Vindex, not because they loved Nero, but because they feared chaos more. Near the town of Vesontio, Vindex's forces met the legions of Lucius Virginius Rufus. The battle was a disaster. Vindex's troops, poorly coordinated and outmatched, were crushed. Some ancient sources suggest confusion, that negotiations were underway when fighting erupted prematurely. Whatever the truth, Vindex knew the cause was lost. Rather than be captured, paraded, and executed, Vindex took his own life. Rome labeled him a traitor. Nero mocked him. But within months, the empire would collapse into civil war. Nero would flee Rome and commit suicide. Galba would be proclaimed emperor, and the rebellion Vindex ignited would usher in the year of the 4 emperors. Vindex did not live to see Nero fall, but history makes one thing clear. Without Vindex, Nero might have ruled longer. Without Vindex, the illusion of imperial invincibility might have endured. He was not a conqueror, he was a spark. And sparks can burn empires. As Rome reeled from Nero's fall and descended into chaos, another rebellion erupted, this time not against a mad tyrant, but against the man who would become Rome's first emperor. His name was Octavian. And those who challenged him were Lucius Antonius and Fulvia. The assassination of Julius Caesar in 44 BCE did not restore the Republic, it shattered it. Power fell into the hands of the second triumvirate, Octavian, Mark Antony, and Lepidus. In theory, they ruled together. In reality, they maneuvered, betrayed, and prepared for war. Mark Antony controlled the East, Octavian held Italy, and in Rome itself, tension simmered. Veterans demanded land, senators feared dictatorship, the people were exhausted by bloodshed. Lucius Antonius, brother of Mark Antony, positioned himself as a defender of the Republic, or at least a defender against Octavian's growing dominance. But behind Lucius stood a formidable force, Fulvia, Antony's wife. Fulvia was no stranger to power. She had survived the chaos of late Republican politics and learned its rules well. She understood that Octavian's control of Italy, his settlement of veterans, and his manipulation of public opinion threatened Antony's position and perhaps Rome itself.
Together, Lucius and Fulvia raised forces in Italy. They claimed they were defending Antony's rights and opposing Octavian's abuse of authority. But in truth, this was about the future of Rome. Would power rest in one man's hands or remain contested? The conflict erupted into open war in 41 BCE, the Perusian War. Octavian moved fast. He cut off supply lines. He isolated rebel cities. Lucius and Fulvia retreated to the fortified city of Perugia. There they were besieged through winter. Starvation followed. Ancient sources describe citizens reduced to eating leather, animals, anything they could find. Fulvia remained defiant. She wrote letters, she rallied support, she refused to surrender easily. Roman propaganda later painted her as power-hungry and manipulative, but those same sources admit something crucial. She was effective. Soldiers followed her, cities resisted because of her. Eventually, Perugia fell. Lucius Antonius surrendered and was spared, a calculated move by Octavian, who wanted to appear merciful. Fulvia was exiled. She fled to Greece, where she would die shortly after, possibly from illness, possibly from grief, possibly from being discarded by history itself. Octavian ordered mass confiscations. Senators were executed. The city was punished brutally. And yet, Rome remembered this war not as a civil struggle over power, but as a footnote, reduced to mockery of Fulvia and dismissal of Lucius. Why? Because Octavian won. History followed his narrative. But strip away the propaganda and the truth remains. Lucius Antonius and Fulvia were among the last Romans to openly resist the rise of a one-man state. They lost not because they were wrong, but because they were outmatched. Fulvia, in particular, was dangerous because she broke every rule. She spoke publicly, she commanded loyalty, she dared to act in a world that demanded her silence. And for that, she was caricatured, diminished, erased. Rome would soon become an empire. The Republic would die quietly, and voices like Fulvia's would vanish with it. Spartacus fought Rome with chains still on his wrists. Vindex fought Rome with ideals in his mind. Lucius Antonius and Fulvia fought Rome with politics, armies, and defiance. Different rebels, different causes, same fate. Rome crushed them, but only after they exposed its fractures. And the story is not over yet, because the next rebels would not be slaves or senators or politicians. They would be generals.
Power in Rome was a game of survival. Even loyalty could become a death sentence. And for some, rebellion wasn't an act of ambition, it was the only way to live with honor. One such man was Clodius Albinus, a general, a philosopher, and a rebel who came within reach of the throne. He was born in Hadrumetum, modern-day Tunisia, in the heart of Roman North Africa. His name, Albinus, meaning the White One, marked him as Roman, but his background was provincial. That didn't matter. In Rome's military machine, ability often outshone ancestry, and Albinus proved himself quickly. Under the reign of Marcus Aurelius and later Commodus, he climbed the ranks. He was known for his discipline, his intellect, and his loyalty. He read philosophy, he trained with his men, he spoke plainly, commanded respect, and won victories along the Rhine and in Britain. Then came chaos. After Commodus was assassinated in 192 CE, Rome plunged into civil war. Several generals, each commanding armies and provinces, declared themselves emperor. Albinus, governing Britain at the time, was one of the most powerful men in the empire. He didn't want war, he didn't seek the purple, but others did. Severus, another North African general, seized Rome quickly. Knowing he couldn't win alone, Severus offered Albinus a deal, an alliance. He would name Albinus Caesar, heir to the empire, in exchange for support. Albinus accepted. For a time, they ruled together, but trust in Rome rarely lasted. Severus solidified his grip, won loyalty from the Danube legions, and then turned on Albinus. He stripped his title, declared him a traitor, and marched west. Albinus had no choice. He declared himself emperor in 195 CE. He crossed into Gaul with the legions of Britain and Hispania and prepared for war. The two armies met near Lugdunum, modern-day Lyon, in one of the largest and bloodiest battles between Roman forces in history. Accounts suggest over 150,000 troops on the field. 2 Roman emperors, 2 ideologies, one would survive. Albinus fought fiercely. His legions nearly broke Severus's line, but late in the day reinforcements arrived for Severus. Albinus was defeated. He fled the field wounded. He tried to hide. He tried to escape, but he was captured and executed. Some say Severus kicked his naked body, decapitated him, and sent his head to Rome. But Rome doesn't remember Albinus as a philosopher general or a man who resisted betrayal. His story, like so many others, was overwritten by his rival. But had he won that day at Lugdunum, history might have remembered him not as a rebel, but as an emperor. Sometimes, the only difference between a rebel and a ruler is the outcome of a single battle. And in the East, another battle was about to begin. His name was Avidius Cassius, and he was no stranger to war. Born in Syria to a noble family, Cassius was Roman to the core, trained in politics, military command, and the brutal realities of imperial succession. He rose under the emperors Antoninus Pius and Marcus Aurelius, fighting in Egypt and Judea. When the empire faced its gravest threat, a massive invasion by the Parthians, it was Cassius who pushed them back, securing Roman dominance in the east. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher emperor, trusted him deeply. He gave Cassius command of Syria, one of the most powerful and wealthy provinces in the empire. He ruled it like a king in all but name. And then, Rome believed Marcus was dead. A rumor swept through the empire in 175 CE. The emperor had died on campaign. Cassius acted fast. Some say he was urged by Faustina, Marcus's own wife, who feared what might happen to the empire under their inexperienced son, Commodus. Others say Cassius moved on his own, seizing the moment. Either way, he declared himself emperor. The eastern provinces backed him. Legions swore loyalty. For a brief moment, the Roman world was divided again. But Marcus Aurelius was not dead, and he did not forgive. When the news reached him, he mourned the betrayal more than the challenge. He ordered preparations for a campaign, but hoped for peace. He instructed his men not to punish Cassius's followers if they surrendered. Marcus wanted unity, not vengeance. He would never get the chance. Before a single battle was fought, Cassius's own officers turned on him. Perhaps fearing defeat or seeking favor from the true emperor, they assassinated him and sent his head to Marcus in a box. Marcus refused to look at it. He buried the rebellion. He erased Cassius from the records. He pardoned his supporters. And yet, for a moment, Avidius Cassius came close to seizing the greatest prize in the empire. He wasn't a barbarian invader. He wasn't a rogue warlord. He was a Roman general with Roman troops in Roman provinces, and he believed Rome needed him more than the boy emperor waiting in the wings. History remembered him as a traitor. But traitors don't rise alone. They rise when an empire is uncertain, and when trust in power is already broken. But not all of Rome's rebels came from within. One woman, a queen, a mother, a warrior, would rise from the misty isles of Britannia and deliver Rome one of its greatest humiliations. Her name was Boudica. She was queen of the Iceni, a Celtic tribe in what is now eastern England. Her husband, King Prasutagus, had ruled as a client king, semi-independent, allowed to govern in exchange for loyalty and tribute to Rome. But when he died in 60 or 61 CE, he left his kingdom to his two daughters and to Rome in the hope of preserving peace. But Rome saw weakness. The Roman procurator Decianus Cottus ignored the will. He annexed the territory outright. Roman soldiers stormed the palace. They flogged Boudica publicly and raped her daughters. The message was clear: submission or ruin. Boudica chose defiance. She united the tribes of eastern Britain, the Iceni, the Trinovantes, and others who had suffered under Roman occupation. She lit the flame of rebellion with fire and fury. Her first target, Camalodunum, the Roman colony at Colchester, it was sacked, burned, its Roman inhabitants slaughtered. The Temple of Claudius, symbol of Roman domination, was reduced to ash. The Roman governor Suetonius Paulinus was away campaigning in Wales. Boudica took her chance. She marched her forces, some 100,000 strong, on Londinium. The Roman city had barely grown from a frontier outpost. Suetonius could not defend it. He evacuated, and Boudica burned it to the ground. Next, Verulamium, modern St. Albans, another Roman town, another blaze. Thousands of Romans and Romanized Britons were killed. By now, Boudica had destroyed 3 major Roman settlements. Tens of thousands were dead. The empire's grip on Britain was in question. Suetonius regrouped. Though vastly outnumbered, he chose his battlefield carefully, somewhere along a Roman road, possibly in the Midlands. He positioned his troops between a forest and a narrowing of land, forcing Boudica's massive army to funnel into a bottleneck. The Britons had numbers, but the Romans had discipline. With precise formations, javelins, and ruthless close-quarters tactics, the Roman legions turned the tide. Boudica's army collapsed in the chaos. The chariots that had once terrified Roman troops now blocked their retreat. The rebellion was crushed. Boudica either took poison or died from illness shortly after. Her daughters vanished from history. Rome kept Britain, but it never forgot the woman who nearly broke it. Tacitus wrote that Boudica was tall, fierce-eyed, with a voice that pierced the air. She rode in a war chariot with her daughters beside her. She called on her people not just to fight for land, but for vengeance, for dignity, for a future free of Roman chains. To Rome, she was a barbarian. To Britain, she became a legend. And across time, Boudica's name would be spoken by queens, rebels, suffragettes, and poets, a symbol of resistance, a warning to tyrants, a queen who rose not because she wanted to rule, but because she could not bear to kneel. These rebels, Spartacus, Vindex, Fulvia, Albinus, Cassius, Boudica, came from different lands, different ranks, different dreams. Some were Romans, some were conquered, some sought justice, others sought survival. But all of them, in their own time, looked at Rome and saw something they could no longer accept. Some fought to end tyranny, some fought to preserve a dying republic, some fought for their people, their dignity, their freedom. And they were crushed, their bodies broken, their names smeared, their stories rewritten, but not erased, because every rebellion leaves a scar, and every scar tells a story. Rome was a titan, a machine, an empire of law, order, and power, but even titans bleed. And in those brief, defiant moments when rebels raised their voices or their swords, Rome trembled, and history remembers.